What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Detroit Love with another video. Today we're going to take a look at setting up and configuring these controls, man. This is your buttons, this is your joystick, this is how it all gets started, man. So let's do it. So the controls is very important. You don't have any gameplay if you can't control the game. And so you have your control panel. You have your control panel that you have to configure, but you also have this front panel where we're going to put the coin buttons. And you have a choice right out the gate of whether you're going to have the same size buttons that will be on the top, or if you're going to have the smaller one. A lot of the joystick and button sets, a lot of them come with this smaller size. It's either the smaller size or it might have white with the coin logos and things like that on it. So you have to decide, are you going to keep it uniform or are you going to make it smaller so they stand out as to being a much different button. And then you have to decide where on the panel are you going to place the buttons. Are they going to be spaced apart at a certain distance? Are they going to be close in the center to line up with the player 1 and player 2 button on the top? Superdimensional on YouTube believes that it should line up with the player 1 and player 2 buttons and not be spread apart, but that's not what most people do. Most people have them spread apart. And then you have this marking, so that's the back of the board. To drill the hole, you're going to need your drill, your step drill, and your bit to start your hole. Now, if you're going to go with the smaller button, then you just have to be very, very careful where you stop this bit so it's not too big. If you're using the standard size, then you could go all the way through and you'll be okay. I think we're going to go with the standard size, but have them close to each other in the center. So I made a little markings. It's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can zoom in. You see those two little dots there, right there and right there, just to give me a starting point. Adjustments slightly. So from the top, this is basically 2 and 14/16. 2. Look like this one may be slightly lower. So when I do this one, I'll just start the hole a little bit lower, slightly. And I'm just using this box to capture most of this sawdust. Got a larger bit on here. And I said I need this one to be slightly lower, so I'm you see how it tears through on the back side, so you have to be very, very careful. both sides, so, but this side's not too bad. So next we have our control board, but we have our red and blue buttons. So in our case, we don't have to worry about getting it in any particular order. If you have like green, yellow, blue, and red, green, blue, and that type of thing, then you have to make sure they're in the right order. But you do have to know which side is player 1, which side is player 2, and you can tell by your your power button. So you want to know you want to get the right colors in the right order that you want. So we're going with red on player 1 and blue on player 2. So this is no big deal to do this. I'm just going to put these in, and I'm going to screw in. Now this thing has black rings that go on the standard button. They had the white ones if you use the smaller buttons, but we're not using those in this build. So all we're going to do is just take this ring, twisting this on. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time showing you that. We're going to do that on all 14 of the buttons here. We're going to put them through the hole, screw them up. One quick thing to note as you're putting these buttons on. So the button has a raised side. They're like sitting on stilts, and the other sides go flush down. One is for the bulb and one is for the control wire. So one is to light it up and one is to send the control. And we'll get into that later, but the point I just want to make here is when you're twisting these buttons in, you just want to make sure that the buttons are lined up the same way. It just makes it easier when you are wiring it up. So as you're twisting them on, just make sure your buttons are lined up the same way. These buttons you have to daisy chain to power the lights or the LED. Over in the Arcade1Up and modding group on Facebook, Keith Lynch came up with this great idea where he uses a water bottle top to help line up the joystick so you ensure that it's centered. So I'm going to try this for the first time. So you just take a drill and you just drill a hole through the top. You don't have to be that accurate. If it's too small, you just cut it a little bigger. The lids these days are so thin that you almost don't even need a drill at all. So you want to drill your screw holes. I suggest, and look how easy this is. You just put that on there, slide up to the top, and it's going to hold that thing in place and allow you to screw your holes in. It doesn't get any easier than that. One thing I do recommend, which I didn't do here, is take a piece of tape and put it on your drill bit so that you don't drill too far. Put the tape up so that when the tape touches the surface, you know you have the perfect size hole without having to worry about going too deep. And so with that bottle cap in there, it holds this thing in place really good. You drill your holes and then you just screw them in. Doesn't take much effort here. Well, actually, it does without those screw holes. You see, I'm fighting a little bit with a couple of these holes because you got to get the right size hole in there. Otherwise, you make your job a little bit difficult than it should be. Use that tape on your drill bit to make sure your holes are the perfect size. So once you're done with all the screws, getting this thing down tight, you just flip it over and just pull out that cap.
So jealous.
And your hole is perfectly lined up. Man, that's a whole lot easier than what I've done in the past. Thanks, Mr. Lynch. And you just do the same thing, repeat the same thing on the other side. I'm not going to bother showing you that again. I'm trying to keep this video short. So now that we have the buttons installed, the joysticks installed, now it's time to wire these things up. And they tie these things down so tight, it's kind of difficult to cut even with small scissors. So sometimes you have to just work these wires out, either enough to get the scissors through or just work them all the way out. And then some you can't work out like that because they just depends on how tight they have them. So just be careful not to damage any of your wires. So let's go ahead and get these things wired up. One important thing to remember when
direction,
wiring up,
so that you know you're going,
you have to do the
apples.
same thing to both sides, player 1 and player 2. Whatever, if you put button A into slot 1,
these cords are not
put
very long.
Button A,
they're not very long.
From player
so you have to
2
keep in mind
slot 1. They have to mirror. If you do not,
two of these have to plug into the front panel.
When you're trying to play games, you're going to
two
click
buttons
on
are drilled.
Click another button. So line these things up so that you can visually see.
So we're going to go on the.
You're doing the same thing on both sides.
We have 8 buttons that we have to plug in. 8 buttons. So we're going to have this one be the farthest away, which is going to be that front panel, and we're going to go up 8, where the farthest one away is going to be on the start button. Alright, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're going to start with 8. Plug that in. And then we're going to, well, we have to find out what is the right button that these things go into. So we have to use one of the other cables. So this here is a daisy chain. This particular button set has one power plug, which will plug into one of the red ports here, and it has the daisy chain. So you have to start at the farthest button because you want the end of it to end up where the coin button is going to be at the far end. So I got to get this out of here, and I can't pull this one out as easily as the other one was because this one has ends on both sides of most of the cable. So I can get the sides out that doesn't have ends out. That should give me enough room to cut this thing. Alright, so this is one long red one and one long black wire, and they all began at this point. They split off from there. So we can plug this in. Now you see there's no light on these boards because they're not plugged in, because the Pi is not plugged up. So this is low voltage, so you're not going to get shocked or anything. So we want to turn on that Raspberry Pi. So now these lights are on, and so now we can plug in our cable. This cable is going to allow us to illuminate our buttons. So again, we're going to start with a black and a red one. Separate these two so they're on two sides of the table. Alright. So both a black and a red end has to meet at each button. And what you want to do is don't commit to plugging these in, because these things are hard to get out if you plug them into the wrong area. So all we do is we touch the button that we're going to test on. We don't know if it's these two that are lifted or these two that are not lifted. So we can see there that the light's coming on. So the LED wires go onto the button side that doesn't have the little lift camera. So you see how this side has the lift, this side goes down, into the light. So that's how you can tell. When you're testing, you test one red and one black. You just touch them to the button, and you see this button has a little red thing on it. So let's see, does red go to red and black go to black? That's correct. So with this button set, we're going to be plugging the red into the red. So as we look at these buttons, we should have lined these up all the same way. So the red's going to be on our right, and black is going to be on our left. So we can touch that and test that, and we see that that's true. So we can commit to plugging it in. Okay. And we're just going to do the same thing with all the other ones. So we're just going to move this thing out the way so they're not in our way.
And we're going to daisy chain this. The red onto the right side and the black onto the other side. See there? So we can just keep on doing that until all of the buttons are illuminated. So that's why it's best to have the pie with the image on it as you test, because, well, you don't really need the image to be on to do this part. You just need to have power to the LED, but you do need to have it powered for the next step, which I'll show you. Now, again, we're doing the same thing, red on this side, black on this side. Make sure we're not changing anything. And if you see like the lights like blinking out, that's usually because it's shorting. So it's like things are touching, so it's like wires over here are touching where they shouldn't be touching, so you have to be careful of that. Alright? So just make sure we're not missing any jumps in this wire. Red on this side, black on this side. And that leaves us with
a couple of, with our longest point being at the coin button, because that distance is going to be a little farther. So we plug in this last one and get our black one. Make sure we're not skipping a jump. All right. All right. So that's the lights. Everything but the coin. We can do that later. Then we want to take our regular buttons, which we started momentarily. We said we're going to start with the start button from this 8th spot. And if we look at our button, it is not marked in any fashion. There's not one side is marked red or black, so it doesn't matter which one goes into which, but we'll be consistent with our wires just so that aesthetically we're doing the same thing. So we're going to put the red on the one side and the black on the other side. And now this is where the pie image is important, because we don't want to move from this spot. We just plug that in. We want to look at our screen. So here's our screen over here. See at the bottom as I press that button? So we know that button is sending a signal to the pie. So we know we can move on to the next button. So we get another wire. Whatever we do on the red side, we want to do the exact same thing on the blue side. So here on the blue side, we started with the start button. So we know the raised side is the button side, the control side, the signal side, and we put the red on the right side and the black on the left side, and we plugged in 8 from the top. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're gonna plug the blue one into the same one. Now, even though I don't have the LEDs on this side, that's still gonna work because that's just a light. Doesn't impact the ability for this button to work. So, and we can test this button the same way. We can tap on it. I'll point you over there to that screen once again. As I tap on this blue button, you can see that it's very faint, but it's there. Okay, and so we're going to do that for all the buttons. We're not going to move on to the next button until we test it by clicking it and watching the screen. All right, so I'll be back. So I have, both the LEDs wired up. But here's a quick note here. When I'm saying that you do the same thing on both sides of the keyboards, the same button in the same port here, you have to keep in mind now that the start button was pretty simple, but now I've moved on. So my first button on the red, I did this one here that's closest to the start button. But now when I start on the blue one, the one I'm doing is not the one closest to the start button, because that's not the mirror of that button there. It would be the one all the way over here on the end. This one here is the one that's next to the joystick, which on this side would be this one. So you have to just make sure you're not doing this wrong. I'm doing this button second. I need to do this button second, this one here. Okay, these two match, these two match, these two match, and so on. You got it? So you just got to keep that in mind. If you do it wrong, you are going to hate having to go back and start all over. All right, so I plugged this one in, and I just want to test it on the screen real quick. Lift this all up. Yep, it's working. I can proceed. Remember earlier I put a tag on the USB cable for the player 2. I'm now putting the braid tie on the coin button cables so that it's easy to identify which one goes here as well. Okay, so I fed the wires in to the back, the USB lines, and just plug up the Pi. And you'll notice that when I plug it in, the lights come on the buttons that are plugged in, but you'll see a lot of blinking on and off throughout this last few minutes here. What's happening there is the line to the LED has like 2 extra button slots, and those, the black and the red, are just loose. They're not plugged into anything, and if they touch anything metal or touch each other, it'll cause these buttons to blink. So what I'm going to do at the end of this, once I connect these 2 buttons the same way I did before, connect the LED line, power line, and connect the controls lines, I am going to use some of the tape I have on hand to tape up those ends so that all this Christmas tree blinking stuff goes away. So that is what you're going to see right now after these 2 buttons are set up. Did my test, that worked fine. Alright, that's the black side. Here's the red side. Just do the test and have them stop touching everybody. Just test this button. So this is how I'm going to do it. I'm just going to lay the red and put the red tape on the red and green on the black. Just lay that so that it's here, and then cut it. Get away. Put that on there and cut it. And then just wrap this. Gonna squeeze these 2 together and then fold up the bottom. That's all. Just so those pieces of wire don't touch. I'll do that for all of them. It's about four on both sides. So now the only thing left is for the joysticks to get plugged in. And a lot of people make this mistake. When you're plugging into this thing here, they'll plug this cable into this end here, and that's the wrong end. When that happens, it'll be similar to those wires touching, the things that keep blinking off and on. Whenever you push a button or something, it'll just blink. So you have to make sure you're putting this on the bottom. All right. So the only thing left is to get the power button situated. And you may notice the board is black. Since it's going to use the template, I didn't want it mirroring, you know, any of these patterns under it, so it looked better with just the black. There's no duplicates of colors or anything between the cracks, just all black, so it looks much nicer. And we are so close. We got the audio and the video to do, and then we're done with this thing, man. Well, you're never really done because it's a hobby grade cabinet. You can do whatever you want to do to add on to it, but you'll be ready to rock and roll real soon. So hey guys, subscribe if you're loving the series, like the video, comment below, let me know what you think about it, and until next time, I'll see you on the web.